sporting a rainbow chromatic emission and a rather uniquely designed fractal theme of the Wyvern series. It is WVN01 Schud Wyvern, with a kit of Suction, Hyperbeam, Hyper Missile, Flight Legs, and the leg ability of Bullet Rain, which buffs base power and success of shooting parts if the number equipped exceeds that of the targets. Now, as another model and installment in the Tagro Chang series that has been a very big staple in the Medarot series pretty much since its early days, Mr. Tagro has yet again struck out of the park with another very unique design of the Heavenly series that sported the original designs of where these came from. And that is, of course, Ku Centaurus, Ku Wyvern, Chi Behemoth, and so on. But in this particular case, Schud Wyvern is most certainly stepping out of the box and breaking boundaries that more than certainly held Ku Wyvern back when it came to the type of combat he can bring to the field. Suction on the head part is a shooting-based skill that, upon attacking a target, will actually pull them closer to him. So that means if he just barely outruns a target to the starting line, he will essentially stall them an extra half second or so upon starting their cooldown phase. But if timed correctly and catches someone at the very end of their cooldown phase, right just getting ready to start their heat phase, it will effectively stall them and force them to start their cooldown all over again. Inversely, if your timing is bad and you catch someone in their heat phase, Suction will actually instantly accelerate their heat phase straight to the center line, which means unless you're purposely planning for them to go first for some reason, they will accelerate their action to guarantee they take place before you, which in many cases can spell doom or a very nasty turn of events that may not go in your favor if timed incorrectly. Hyperbeam on the right arm is a shooting attribute skill that has an optic attribute to it. With this, it means it has a ×2 damage bonus at 30% charge and a ×3 damage bonus at 100% charge, which means this is most certainly going to be a very, very powerful form of damage output that Schud Wyvern brings to the field, especially given that it is non-heavy. In addition to the arm and head being non-heavy, the left arm of Hyper Missile also is non-heavy, but is also a gunpowder attribute attack. But instead of being an AoE or a scattered AoE like Missile or Napalm, Hyper Missile instead packs passive pierce damage, which makes it much more consistent in forms of breaking parts across the board, instead of peppering the foe and then using 1 or 2 blows after that to destroy a bunch of things at once. So out of the 3, Hyper Missile is definitely the one to go with when it comes to damage output and breaking a lot of parts really quickly. Now, as expected of the original Wyvern type and of this new LED style one, Schud Wyvern also is sporting flight-based legs, which means he has good coverage across most terrains, as Flight has one of the next best rounded when it comes to terrain compatibility, with only a couple really nasty matches. Of course, you do also have to be very, very careful of anyone packing anti-air, as doing so will certainly spell an end for this LED dragon faster than he really means to be, and prevents him from staying on the field longer than he needs to. His stats across the board, though, despite being a flight-based model which typically tends to focus more on speed and agility at the cost of power or armor, actually is moderately tanky when it comes to what he brings to the table. With a head HP of about 3,500, arms about 3,400 each, and legs also at 3,450, pretty solid HP pool for a flight-based model, which you really don't see all that often for flight-based legs like himself. When it comes to his leg stats, even though he is trading just a little bit of his mobility for that extra armor, that honestly isn't something that goes too badly against him in this respect. With the mobility of 987, he's still pretty close to that 1000 mark, which means he's already going to have speed well to his advantage once he's on the field. An evade of 1565 is most certainly going to be his big charm point, though, as it means he's going to be focusing more on dodging or grazing attacks to keep his damage low instead of outright tanking them. But, as expected of flight-based models and leg types, a melee resist of 513 and a shoot resist of 868 is definitely not great, as it means, especially from incoming melee attacks, he will be definitely taking a lot of notably high damage and incoming punish damage from anyone that does manage to land a hit on him. And that is not including or counting anything that is of the anti-air variety, melee or shooting based, that will for sure spell an end for this Rainbow Wyvern type once he's on the field. But with a heavy limit of 1 on the legs, that is kind of a rarity, as it means that if you do choose to mix up the parts, it still will be a pretty solid leg you can use across the board if you do need it for your shooting types. And on the topic of shooting types, the leg ability of Bullet Rain does tie in his build very, very nicely, as it does mean being triple shooting. Unless he's going against someone else that is also triple shooting, he will already have base power and success bonus advantage above them just because of the Bullet Rain ability. All this being said though, as a pure set score, I still do have to rate Schud Wyvern a pretty solid 7.5 out of 10. Even though the synergy between his parts is kind of weird, between Suction, Hyperbeam, and Hyper Missile, it is kind of tied together in a sense that you can make it work moderately well if you know what you're doing. Hyper Missile will probably be the most consistent form of conventional damage across it. Suction if you find yourself needing to stall somebody and you're able to do it without risking anything, and Hyper Beam once you can get a Metaforce charge going. And Bullet Rain will tie the whole thing together in a nice pretty bow, so if you do use him as a pure set, anyone that's not using triple shooting, he already will have advantage over. As mixed parts, I do have to rate him just a little bit higher at an 8 out of 10, primarily for the fact that even if his synergy as a pure set is kind of weird, mixed parts is where he really starts fighting spicy and bringing some variety to the table. Hyper Beam and Hyper Missile, both non-heavy no less, means that it's going to have a lot of variety and flexibility in any team build you use them on that is in need of a high power shooting part. And as mentioned earlier, Flight Legs with Bullet Rain, a single heavy slot end, decent mobility, good evade as expected of Flight Legs, are actually pretty solid and can be made moderately forgivable despite the very low resist stats, as long as you can keep him protected on the field and keep anything from touching him.